変身。おい。
Yeah, Hanto, I think you forgot to take out the little tab that separates the batteries from the electronics. We opened this week with Shoma on the phone with Sachika while Hanto watched, and was reminded of what she told him in the previous episode, which, yeah, wasn't making him feel like any less of a heel. Thus, when Shoma just so happened to have his back turned, he snuck out. Meanwhile, Sachika herself had split off with Dente's group as he was trying to recreate Lakia's driver, and I'm pretty sure that's one of the actual toys y'all got there opened up. Way to go, y'all ruined the resale value on the perfect little collectible. Also, I usually don't talk about episode titles, but come on, I can't be the only one who thought about Red Ranger Isekai after we finished reviewing it yesterday, right? Anyway, Lucky agreed to try and take care of the bitter Gavv since he had already been to Suka's lab in a previous episode. Meanwhile, Shoma tried to look for Hanto, who in his disoriented state ended up picking a fight with some guys who, yeah, I'm pretty sure we can't actually show anything here. I mean, yeah, we could show the dudes in spandex fight all day, but I think this site tends to get antsy on normal people fighting, so all I'll say is just imagine what you want to see happen to your least favorite IRL streamer ever, and you'll have a good idea of what's happening to Hanto. It was so bad that it somehow knocked his perm right out of his hair. In the end though, Hanto managed to make his way back to his mentor's office that by this point had likely got to a new tenant, but let the guy have his moment. After all, at this point, Hanto had become aware of how many lives he ended up damaging or outright destroying in his pursuits for avenging his mother. From mentally traumatizing Shoma to get his mentor caught in the crossfire, his path to destruction ended up with at least a couple more passengers joining in. And yeah, at this point, I don't know what else to say other than Yusuke Hino is a really good dramatic actor, as not only was his crying here spot on, but so was him briefly lashing out at Shoma after the whole world just didn't make any sense anymore, as he had become the center of so much suffering.
Ow, ow, that mood whiplash, ow!
Also, Sachika, I get what you're trying to do, girl, but you do realize that the genius types like Dente do have their own systems in place in getting stuff done, right? Anyway, to try and cheer Hanto up, Shoma bought frappes for the two of them. However, in probably the most shocking twist of the show, the chocolate rider didn't actually like sweets. Being of the three protagonists of the show, Shoma was the only one who actually lived his gimmick. Then again, at least Lakia had the excuse that his species normally ate rocks. Hanto's just being a picky eater.
多分フラッペはアイスじゃね。
Well, it actually really depends on the style. If we're talking Greek, it's more like an iced coffee, and I think in New England it's basically a milkshake, which I would consider ice cream. Yes, I'm a stickler for details, why do you ask? Regardless, Shoma did take the time to comfort him in ways that admittedly even chocolate couldn't do alone. In particular, by pointing out how he was indeed a victim of Suga's deception, so morally, it's not as though he should feel any sort of guilt. But by that same token, it was also only natural for him to blame himself, especially in regards to those like his mentor who ended up getting dragged into his conflict, which, yeah, Shoma understood way more considering his family's body count was way higher. And yet, he tried to maintain a positive attitude in spite of the many doubts and regrets that he harbored. This led to easily one of my favorite lines in this whole series.
だからこそ悲しいこと繰り返さないように前に進むしかないって思う。
Again, while a lot of the stuff his family did was well beyond his control, the feeling of guilt will inevitably weigh down on anyone with at least a little bit of empathy. But rather than just let it suppress us, it is always better to take steps to better ourselves and those around us. That has been one of the major recurring morals of this part of the series between all three of the heroic riders of the show, and one that Kamen Rider in general has had to live by from the very beginning. Though of course, in this world, there is also those with little to no empathy like Suka, who only have their own selfish pursuits. Granted, as we'll see in just a bit, he might have been a good person at one point, but something happened that drained him of his humanity, and now he was only dedicated to his goal of creating an ultimate immortal life form. Thus, fortunately, Lakia was there to shut down his operation.
What?
that every show I've been watching lately all end up reminding me of Evangelion? But yeah, if the creepy lullaby music didn't make it clear, Suga kind of longed for an actual son and not just his little clone army that he had amassed. This was because he had been a father at one point, and while it wasn't explicitly stated, I think we can safely assume that the child passed away very young likely. As a result, he then likely dedicate himself to his ultimate lifeform research as a coping mechanism. After all, if humanity were to achieve immortality, no one else would have to suffer like he did. Thus, in his mind, all of his actions were totally justified, as he was just moving humanity to the next logical step in evolution, even though I think Kermit put it best.
It's amazing. You are 100% wrong. I mean, nothing you've said has been right.
Yeah, I've already expressed my opinions about immortality in other videos and how I think it would just make life meaningless, so let's just all agree that this guy's full of crap, and thus the writers needed to put him down. So while Lakia very effectively dealt with the clones, Shoma and Hanto fought Suga.
ほら行こう断るだが
Nope, Rohan's not needed for something this obvious. The problem, of course, was that the former was at his weakest due to malnutrition, and the latter couldn't use the Valen Buster without fully clogging up his arteries. Thus, after Shoma gave him a bike to escape with, Hanto visited Dente to get his copy of Lakia's driver and just drove back. Yeah, it is a little weird that Hanto was able to drive back and forth so quickly to Dente's cave while Shoma was still fighting Suga, especially with how long those roads look, but whatever, Hanto had gotten the pudding driver and was going to henching into Vlan Nigel, or not.
エルグには作れたものはわしには作れフランクか
Rick really was never the same after he defeated Prime. However, Hanto still decided to try and fight, not with superpowers, but rather overacting. I mean, don't get me wrong, Hito's performance was absolutely amazing here, as he really brought out all of the rage and emotion of his character, making for an incredibly epic and standout performance, but good lord, this guy's going to need all the lozenges by the time the show is over. However, as Shoma also tried to help out his friend, a new Goshizo was born from the frappe he ate earlier. And surprisingly, this little guy was probably the most coherent talker of all the little mascots of the show for whatever reason. Maybe the coffee helps. In any case, since it was a bit more of a liquid, it was literally designed for the Vlostrom gear. And yeah, Frappe Custom is probably my second favorite suit design in the show so far, after Blizzard Sorbet, with the gold and brown complement each other very nicely, while the whipped cream lightning bolts broke things up very nicely, while also just looking really cool. I think they also might have been a reference to a popular brand of chocolate in Japan called Black Thunder. However, since frappes are cold, it actually had ice powers very similar to the aforementioned Blizzard. This led to a pretty awesome fight between Suga and Hanto that unfortunately completely destroyed this poor library in the process, but it was kind of worth it just for this one line.
俺のまま弱い人間のまま強くなってやる
With that, Hanto defeated Suga and fully avenged his mentor. Afterwards, he and Shoma finally fully reconciled in an exchange that didn't have any gay undertones to it, mostly because they were above. And the episode ended with Suga passing away, but Naivo finding him and saying that he'd take over his research. This was just an amazing episode that brought out the best in Hanto. On top of his interactions with Shoma just being wholesome as all hell, his actor just went all out with his performance. If I had to complain about anything, I guess I kind of wish that Suga could have stuck around a little longer, but it also might have been his time to go. I think the series about grown men who eat copious amounts of candy might actually be one of the most mature Kamen Rider series of recent memory. I mean, they've just covered a lot of serious topics with an incredible amount of maturity. This week was obviously about trauma and how you don't necessarily overcome it, but how you can deal with it. Yes, thankfully, Shoma didn't skirt around the issue and just say that Hanto will overcome it when really some people never do, and that's fine. It's all about how we live on from it, and seeing Hanto finding his resolve was incredible, both with how he managed to defeat Suga to prove his beliefs wrong, and of course finally fully reconciling with Shoma in a really wholesome resolution. Meanwhile, in the background, Dente's group kept proactive by both creating the second driver and dealing with all of the bear Gavs, which, yeah, that was some different kind of mature stuff. Though on that note, while I'm actually a little thankful that we're moving away from the clones, I do kind of wish that Suga could have stuck around a little longer since he only just became a rider, and they could have stood to flesh out his backstory a little more. In fact, it was kind of interesting and a little tragic to see him talking to Hanto like a disappointed dad by the end of the fight, as though he really did see him as somewhat of a surrogate son. However, that might not be too much of an issue with Naivo taking over his research and might even become the second Big for all we know. Regardless, this was still overall a great episode with some amazing performances from Yusuke Hino, an awesome debut for a new super form, and yeah, Hanto/Shoma is cute. Whether or not frappes qualify as ice cream, it at least is the treat that managed to mix these bars back together in sweet harmony. Thank you for watching, and if you need a pick-me-up in the morning, well, you can watch our other videos on this channel while you get your coffee. Starting this week, we've got a new schedule that, thankfully, is going to reduce our workload down to 3 shows a week and all of it done on the weekend. So, look forward to whatever comes next. Until then, though, farewell for now, my friends, and oh, geez, there's that much sugar in this stuff? Treadmill, here I come.